Good morning and welcome. Thank you to those of you who managed to get here despite the excitement of the half marathon. So welcome to everyone here today, whether you've been attending for a long time, for a few times, and especially if you're joining us for the first time today. You're all welcome. However you're feeling, sad, worried, happy, or curious, whatever your faith or none, you are welcome here. The theme of our services this month is healing, and today's we'll be looking at forgiveness and how that can play a part in healing. There will be differing points of view expressed, each valid in its own way, and I hope there will be something meaningful for each one of you to take away and ponder upon. As is our custom, we start by lighting our chalice flame as a symbol of our free religious faith. And if you're at home joining in on Zoom and have a candle nearby, you may like to light it with us now. Words for chalice lighting by Paulo Renato Garrochinho of the Liberal and Unitarian Christians of Portugal. Breath of life that some call God, breath of freedom and forgiveness, you give us life and sustain us in our life's struggles. You give meaning to our existence. You make it possible for us to live and pray together in spite of our differences and singularities. We thank you, breath of freedom and forgiveness, for in you and through you, respect and love can exist. In you and through you, we have the power to dream and to work for a new world, a world of freedom, love, and forgiveness. I have some opening words which were actually written by Erna Colebrook, one of our members now living in Cumbria with her daughter. Erna keeps in touch with several of us, and a while ago sent me an email in which she wrote, "Some time ago, I watched a TV programme where the political problems of Colombia were discussed. Someone said, 'The price of peace is forgiveness.' I thought it was so beautifully put that I wrote it down." She then referred to Archbishop Desmond Tutu's writing on forgiveness, probably thinking of these words: "To forgive is not just to be altruistic. It is the best form of self-interest. It is also a process that does not exclude hatred and anger. These emotions are all part of being human. You should never hate yourself for hating the terrible things that others have to suffer. The depth of your love is shown by the extent of your anger. However, when I talk of forgiveness, I mean the belief that you can come out the other side a better person than the one being consumed by anger and hatred. Remaining in that state locks you in a state of victimhood, making you almost dependent on the perpetrator. If you can find it in yourself to forgive, then you are no longer chained to the perpetrator." Erna closed by saying, "We must always forgive the people we love the most." It's time for our first hymn. The words will appear on the screen, but if you have a hymn book, it's number 62 in the purple book. Here we have gathered.
Come and step inside.
Please do sit down. It's a time for prayer and reflection. And the first of our prayers is for others, written by the Reverend Cliff Reed. We hold in our thoughts and prayers all those of this fellowship, all those of our families, our wider kindred, and the wider community outside our doors, who may be in need of solace. For the sick, may there be healing and strength. For the distressed in mind, may there be peace and tranquility of spirit. For the embittered, may there be reconciliation and a new beginning. For the despairing, may there be faith and rekindled joy. For the fearful, may there be courage and unquenchable hope. With trembling hands we reach out to those who suffer. May love and life flow out through us to restore, to relieve, and recreate. And a short Buddhist prayer of forgiveness. If I have harmed anyone in any way, either knowingly or unknowingly, through my own confusions, I ask their forgiveness. If anyone has harmed me in any way, either knowingly or unknowingly, through their own confusions, I forgive them. And if there is a situation I am not yet ready to forgive, I forgive myself for that. For all the ways that I harm myself, judge, or be unkind to myself through my own confusions, I forgive myself. And I'm going to include a prayer which we don't always have. It's the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples, also known as the Lord's Prayer. And you're welcome to join in either silently or speak the words with me. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. We always have a story, and this week it's actually a story from the Bible, and Jill is going to read it for us.
This is from the Gospel according to St. Matthew. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had to be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him, cancelled the debt, and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, Be patient with me and I will pay it back. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. "You wicked servant," he said. "I cancelled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had on you?" In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart.
Thank you, Jill. And now we have another story, and this is the story of Margot. When Margot was 16, her father was murdered in an armed robbery at the Hudson Bay store where he worked. Many years later, Margot embarked on a path of reconciliation with her father's killer. Margot says, "The last time I saw my dad, he was in his coffin. I kissed him on his forehead and said, 'Dad, I promise that your life would not have been for nothing.' At the time, I didn't know what that meant." 3 days after he was shot, a journalist asked my mother, "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive the man who killed your husband?" Without hesitating, my mum said, "Yes, I forgive him so that I can live." She knew if she thought differently, she wouldn't survive. It wasn't so straightforward for Margot, however. The family was shattered, and she needed to be alone to think and grieve, and soon moved out. She felt like half a person, completely lost. Despite this, she achieved honours degrees in English and philosophy, married, and had 2 daughters. Although the marriage didn't last, Margot's daughters gave her a reason to live. She says, "An author I knew said to me, 'You're not the only one who feels pain.' But I was trapped in my hurt. Any injustice filled me with vitriol. Poetry saved me. I ran courses using poetry as a form of healing to help people with their grief. I published several books and received an award from the National Association of Poetry Therapy in America for my book, Dance with Your Healing Tears, Let Me Begin to Speak. And felt like a loser all my life. This accolade made me feel worth something again. Then a woman she didn't know sent a donation to Margot's publisher. Margot sat there, staring at the name, and said to her daughter, "You won't believe this, but I've just received a donation from the wife of Grandpa's killer." During 14 years in prison, the murderer, called Glenn, had transformed his life. He attended an event to bring victims and perpetrators together. He saw Margot's work and wanted to contact her. Via his wife, Glenn and Margot started exchanging emails. He asked Margot to forgive him. She said, "His words helped to heal me, but after a while, the words weren't enough. I knew I needed to look into his eyes. So 3 months later, I met the man who killed my father." It was extremely powerful. We did lots of talking and lots of crying. It was as if we knew each other. This was the first of several meetings which have informed my work on restorative justice, which I now refer to as Sorbonne. Glenn used it to sign off an email. He told me it was a Zulu word meaning, I see you, our shared humanity. Margot says, at first, I had hated the very notion of forgiveness. To tell someone who is in pain to forgive is brutal. Forgiveness can't be prescriptive. The moment I began to consider forgiveness, my whole body started to feel different, more complete, and more at peace. For me, forgiveness is a fluid process, which means healing. Before I embarked on this path, half of me was a void and full of nothingness, whereas now I have friendship with the man who killed my father, and that has helped put back meaning into my life. A lot to think about there. So let's join our voices again in singing a hymn. The hymn number 101, Dear Lord and Father of Mankind. For those who have a green hymn book, it's number 101, and if you want, the words will appear on the screen. I'm going to read a meditative prayer by Toby McNeile, which was actually given to me by Anne Carter some years ago. Let us build a walled garden for our spirits. Fill it with warm sunshine flowers, trees in blossom, and birds singing. Let it be a safe haven for small animals and for ourselves, a place to rest and contemplate. A place to build up our energies and restore our souls. In our garden, let there be special places with seats and fountains, places to pause and think about life. Let one of these special places be dedicated to love and another to forgiveness. The garden of love is to contemplate the love that is caritas, care and compassion and charity for all living things. Caritas for our loved ones and our friends. Caritas for the people whose lives we touch as we pass through each day. Lives to appreciate and give thanks for. Lives to understand. And in the garden of love that is caritas, let there be a place where we can see our own reflection. At the entrance to the garden of forgiveness is a saying from the prayer that Jesus taught. As we forgive them that trespass against us. Let this garden be a garden of paths and spaces and places to write a promise. A corner to sit and ponder about forgiveness. Why is it harder to forgive than to love? Why the scars and blemishes of old hurts and misunderstandings still give pain? Why anger burns slow and destructive and will not go out? How to deal with an insult or manage an injustice? How to review a comment or a moment and look for a truth and not a poisoned arrow? From the garden of forgiveness, let there be a gate into the garden of love, and from the garden of love, a way of return to the world. To err is human, to forgive divine. This well-known and oft-quoted phrase was written by Alexander Pope in his long poem, Essay on Criticism. That was about 300 years ago. In his long poem of over 700 lines, to err is primarily concerned in this case with how writers and literary critics behaved in Pope's age, as compared in classical writers of ancient Greece and Rome. Very interesting, you may be thinking, but how relevant is this to an address in a modern church service? The word err itself, I think, is a little quaint, old-fashioned, maybe even genteel. Have I erred in starting like this? The word err means to make a mistake. It can be widened to include all the petty and all the serious wrongs and harms, intentional or otherwise, that human beings inflict upon one another, upon other living beings, upon somebody else's property, and upon our environment. Physical actions, and sometimes words alone, may threaten someone else's well-being, mental health, even their very life. So how to react to these misdeeds? As a very imperfect human being myself, do I retaliate immediately, blaming the other person who treated me or a loved one so unkindly? Or do I simmer inside and harbour long-lasting resentments? Or do I turn the proverbial other cheek, cease to blame the wrongdoer, cancel the debt? In other words, do I forgive? Is it always possible to forgive? Does it depend on the degree of harm done to me or a loved one? Can we forgive on behalf of someone else who was wronged or harmed? How easy is it to forgive the unknown perpetrator of some wrongdoing? Can forgiveness only work if the wrongdoer accepts it and tries to make amends? Think of this. It's probably easy to forgive the child who unintentionally scrapes past you with her bike as she tries to squeeze through a narrow alley, especially if she says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean it." It's an accident with little consequence. It's not quite so easy to forgive the driver without insurance who runs into the back of your car at the traffic lights, causing inconvenience and expense. And even that is relatively minor compared with the behaviour of the hit-and-run driver who leaves a loved one badly injured or dead. How hard would that be to forgive? Millions of words have been written about forgiveness down the ages by people of all faiths and none. Starting with an example from the Christian standpoint, in the story from Matthew, which Jill read for us earlier, where Peter asked Jesus, how many times should he forgive a person who does him wrong, written as sinning against him? Should it be up to 7 times? Jesus answers, I tell you, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. I can see some of you working it out. If you're good at mental arithmetic, you will have worked out that this is 490 times. But I don't think Jesus meant that we should not forgive on the 491st occasion. From the parable, we see that forgiveness doesn't always come easily, if at all. Being able to forgive someone may take a lifetime, if at all. And it needs to come from the heart, as Jesus comments at the end of his story. Does that mean to forgive and forget, I wonder? Traditional Christians say that they would pray for the person who wronged them, seeing themselves as also needing forgiveness, as we heard in the parable. They would admit it is normal to feel anger towards wrongdoing and injustice, but that is not their place to judge the other person. They would leave that to God. Forgiveness is hard work, but it brings a sense of being freed from anger, resentment and hurt that might have imprisoned them. Corrie ten Boom was a Christian woman who survived a Nazi concentration camp during the Holocaust. She said, "Forgiveness is to set a prisoner free and to realize the prisoner was you." Let us remember that Jesus was raised as a Jew and would have known the Jewish law, which requires the wrongdoer to ask forgiveness from the person they have harmed, in whatever way. The victim is regarded as being cruel if they do not forgive, and it's better to do so ungrudgingly, from the heart. Moses Maimonides, a 12th century Jew living in Spain, wrote, "Repentance and Yom Kippur only atone for sins between man and God, such as eating forbidden foods. The prayer before Yom Kippur extends complete forgiveness to everyone who has sinned against you, in whatever way, during the year. There are two exceptions: for stealing money, which can be claimed in a court of law, and for someone who does wrong in anticipation of complete forgiveness." Another piece of Jewish writing adds that one may withhold forgiveness if it is for the good of the person asking, to teach them not to take it lightly. I have read that Muslims attach great importance to the concept of forgiveness. This is because Allah desires people to show forgiveness to other humans. The Prophet Muhammad taught his followers that the person who pardons his enemy, even while having the power to extract revenge, will be nearest to God in their hereafter. Once someone asked the Prophet, "How many times are we to forgive our servants' faults?" He remained silent. The question was repeated. Again, the Prophet gave no answer. But when the person asked a third time, the Prophet said, "Forgive your servant 70 times a day." He added, "My heart is clouded until I have asked God's forgiveness 70 times during the day and night." And here we see a similarity to the Bible teachings. For people like the Buddhists, the act of forgiving is more important than being forgiven. Forgiving someone won't make him or her less guilty. They will still need to learn how to become better, because they are subjected to the laws of karma, in which every bad action generates another bad action directed to them. Those who can't forgive, they believe, attract a bad karma to themselves. Bad feelings and destructive emotions like anger, revenge, and resentments may be transformed into an illness sometimes. So their thinking is the best attitude is to forgive and do it unconditionally. The aggressors will face their karma anyway. Those who forgive do not attract any bad karma to themselves and will enjoy life without resentments or anger. They believe that forgiveness is a lesson that has to be learned in many different incarnations, and so someone will be reborn and reborn until they are emotionally unaffected, no matter how much others harm them. The purpose of karma, they believe, is not to punish people, but to make them walk in the right path, the Dharma. Karma is a law, just like laws of chemistry and physics. It is not a means of punishment. So what about punishment? Every society wants reparation from its wrongdoers. These measures may include losing certain privileges or being kept securely apart from open society until they're deemed safe to rejoin it. And sometimes this means they spend their lives in prison. And if they do, that should be done humanely. Otherwise, the justice system itself becomes an official wrongdoer. Ideally, punishment and imprisonment provide opportunities to re-educate the wrongdoers, to enable them to play a useful role when they are released back into society. Restorative justice, where the perpetrator and the victim meet, usually in carefully supervised conditions, has been tried with varying amounts of success. For some perpetrators, meeting face to face with the people they have hurt, hearing how their crimes have affected them, will transform their lives, and some offenders reform completely, going on to live useful lives, working to prevent others from committing similar offences. The Forgiveness Project was founded nearly 20 years ago by Marina Cantazzino, a journalist. She wanted to tell the real stories of people who don't want revenge for wrongs done to them, but rather to seek restoration and healing. The Forgiveness Project began an exhibition launched in London in 2004. It was a series of images and personal stories exploring forgiveness from both sides. People from many countries, including England, Northern Ireland, South Africa, and America, contributed. This exhibition has been displayed in over 500 places around the world, and some of us here today visited it at Marjohn's many years ago. It shows people's experiences of forgiveness as a healing process, a path out of victimhood, and ultimately, a journey of hope. Margot's story, which we heard earlier, is one example of many featured. As we heard, she eventually found peace and healing when she was able to meet and forgive the man who'd killed her father. And that can't have been easy. Someone asked the founder of the Forgiveness Project what forgiveness means to her. She replied, "It's more than letting go. Inevitably, it grows out of being hurt or harmed. Letting go just means not engaging, and so it's different. Forgiveness is more than just not hating. You need to put yourself in the shoes of the other. It's not just about forgiving the act, but forgiving the fallibility of humanity." There's a wonderful quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn about how the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? It's not always easy to forgive, and who are we to judge if someone can't believe, or even if they can? Many people were offended when Gordon Wilson, whose daughter Mari died in the Enniskillen bombings many years ago, said that he forgave the bombers. A Belfast-born expert on conflict transformation, Dr. Geraldine Smythe, says forgiveness can play a part in delivering peace and reconciliation. She says, forgiveness is a very loaded concept. It comes primarily, I think, from a religious background and suggests something more than human, something self-transcending. You can't force it, and you can't manage it. She is a trained psychotherapist, a Dominican nun, and a board member of Healing Through Remembering, Northern Ireland. She says, there is always a relational context to forgiveness, and this was evident in Wilson's reaction at Enniskillen. In the intimate, final moments with his daughter, he spoke her name 3 times, and she voiced her love for him. And that powerful bond of relational love and expression of unconditional love maybe released some kind of self-transcending power in him to be more than the perpetrators, to break out of the cage of instinctive revenge that might otherwise have encased him, like the rubble did. And I can remember, and a lot of you may have seen a clip of it recently during the Jubilee celebrations, there was a mixed reaction when the Queen shook the hand of Martin McGuinness, a former IRA member, when she visited Ireland some years ago. Lord Mountbatten, uncle to the Queen and Prince Philip, and several family members were killed by an IRA bomb over 40 years ago. But the handshake was significant for the Queen, and I think for Martin McGuinness, and also for bettering relations between the Republic of Ireland and the UK. Summing it up well, I think I'm going to quote from Sarah Moores Campbell, who writes this about forgiveness. There is incredible power in forgiveness. Forgiveness may require a dimension of justice, penance, if you like, in traditional terms, but not always, for what it holds sacred is not fairness, but self-respect and community. Forgiveness does not wipe away guilt, but invites reconciliation. And it is as important to be able to forgive as it is to be forgiven. We can be open and receptive to the power of forgiveness, which, like any gift of the Spirit, isn't of our own making. Its power is rooted in love. The Greek word for this kind of love is agape. Martin Luther King Jr. defined agape as love seeking to preserve and create community. This kind of love is human, but also the grace of a transcendent power, whatever you like to call it, that lifts us out of ourselves. It transforms and heals, even when we are separated by time, or space, or death. It reconciles us to ourselves and to life. Its power abides not just between us, but within us. If we invited the power of agape to heal our personal wounds and give us the gift of forgiveness, we would give our world a better chance of survival. So it's complicated, far more complicated than the simple phrase, to err is human, to forgive divine. But maybe that's good as an end point or a start point. It's about healing oneself as well as the other person. And some might say that's when the divine in all of us surfaces. Amen. Thank you for listening. So let us raise our voices in our final hymn. It's in Green Hymn Book number 188, and the words will appear on the screen. Let love continue long. Time for our closing words. From Eusebius, Bishop of Caesarea Maritima, in the 314. May I be no one's enemy, and may I be the friend of that which is eternal and abides. May I never rejoice in the ill fortune of one who has wronged me. May I, to the extent of my power, give needful help to all who are in want. May I never fail a friend. May I always keep tame that which rages within me. May I accustom myself to be gentle and never be angry with others because of circumstances. May I know good people and follow in their footsteps.